Councillor Egan.
Here.
Councillor Pilch.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Here.
Councillor Benoit is here. Councillor Brown, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I'm present on Zoom.
All right. Councillors Lawrence and Pillsbury are excused tonight. Our third order of business is to waive reading and accept as printed the February 4th, 2025 meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right. And we will be doing roll call votes tonight with our virtual counselor. Any discussion? Okay. Councillor Egan.
Yes.
Councillor Pilch.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Brown.
Yes.
And Councillor Benoit votes yes. All right, we will move on to item number 4, which is announcements. Quiet night tonight. I don't have any announcements. Any announcements from council? All right. We will move on to information exchange. I have a few items. The Finance Committee met for the first time last week. We are still working on our work plan. I think we will have that set for our next meeting. We have elected Councillor Pillsbury as the chair of the Finance Committee. Last week, we had our second of 3 committee workshops. An announcement coming out of that is the Shellfish Commission is looking for members for quorum. Any other councillor updates before we move on to the committee updates?
Maybe start with committees.
Councillor?
We have another workshop next week, and I didn't quite hear all of the groups that are coming, GP COG and who else?
Freeport Community Services, Cable Advisory Board. Housing Trust.
Okay, great.
It was 4.
GB COG?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Municipal Facilities Committee met last week and discussed a number of issues. One was the request of the tenant at Dunning's Boatyard, Falls Point Marine, to temporarily store some items outside of their leased area. You may notice, if you happen to be driving down South Freeport Road, that there are some aluminum pieces that have newly been manufactured and are waiting to be delivered, but they are going to sit there in the snow until they can go out on the water. So that approval was granted. We also discussed the ongoing concerns of folks on Buston's Island about summer parking, particularly at the Seoul School, which of course is leased to the French School. And we are working on a solution for that. So we are trying to maximize what space is there to make sure that everyone has a place to park, but also acknowledge that there will only be increasing pressure, most likely, on parking in South Freeport. So it's a long-term concern that we will continue to talk about for a while.
Great. Anything else from up here on the dais? All right, we will move on to the FEDC update. Councillor Egan.
Yeah, previously we've been talking about the new evolution of FEDC over the past 12 months, and we've had a few updates, and I think we talked at either last meeting or the one before that there would be becoming a regular cadence and schedule of updates from FEDC to the council directly and to the public, so that we can have better communication and understanding about what this group is doing, which is a lot. So I'm going to introduce Mary Davis and Tony Whitney from the Chamber Board, and they have a brief 7 or 8 minute presentation, and then we'll get into some dialogue and answer questions.
That's great. Thank you so much. Great to be here tonight. It sort of feels like old home week here. So pleased to be here. I'm Mary Davis. This is Tony Whitney. So what we wanted to do for tonight, can you get that to come up, Kenny? Don't know? Okay. Okay. I'm going to start talking and we can. So what we promised you all that we would do, push the button. There we go. Thank you. Best laid plans. Best laid plans. It's always true. Here we go. You know I love my visuals, so of course I have to
Yes.
wait for those, so you know that about
We're
me.
about ready to get out a flip chart if this doesn't work out.
Okay, I think it's going to work now. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. So we're here to give you an update of where we've come from October. There are some slides in this deck that are kind of overview of what we talked about in October when we were here, but we thought since there were some players that were new and some of the audience that hadn't seen it, that I'd go through it quite quickly, but I really want to get to the point, which is all about what we've learned in the last couple of months. Go ahead to the next slide. So the wonderful thing that I want to say is this is a board, my FEDC board, and the representative of John and Brett, who have worked really diligently over the last few months to put us now into the place where we're out marketing about who Freeport is. It's a great board with a very wide diversity of individuals on it. We have another couple of individuals who will be joining in the next month or so, but it's just a great board that's working very hard. So pleased to have them there. It makes a difference to have these connections into the community. Go ahead next. We really believe that our continued collaboration together is what is going to make this work. Because, wins are contagious. So with all of us working together, and it's not just FEDC, but it's Visit Freeport, it's the chamber, it's the council, it's the town. It's like if we're all rowing in the same direction, saying yes to people who are coming to Freeport, if we get a win, then we can keep going. So it's really important that we continue to work together. That's a good takeaway. Go ahead next. This has been our mission for a long time, but it's the sustainable economic growth that I want to poke on here. We've always known that in Freeport, the downtown helps to keep all of our real estate taxes lower. And so it's important for us in FEDC that we continue to do that sustainable economic development because it benefits everyone in Freeport, not just what we're doing in town. So important, that's one of what FEDC has always thought. Go ahead. This is what we said we'd do when we were in front of you in October. We said we are going to be, and it's not duplicative with what the town is doing. I've talked with Sophie. It's about how do we make sure that we each have like our areas, our lanes that we're working within, but we collaborate across. So what we said, it's not duplicative. We're advocates of bringing people to Freeport. They need to hear from us. We want to provide industry experience back into the council and the town so we can talk about what needs to be done and provide that collaborative support that helps people get here. It's hard to open new businesses, period, and we want to make it as easy as possible to come to Freeport. Go ahead. So this is what we've done in joint partnerships as a town and a council and us. And what we decided to do in October was this business outreach. So in October, you all gave us some money. We went away. In November, we hired 2 contractors, Tawny and another person. We hit the ground running in December. So you're about to see what happens from December to January. Go ahead. And again, this is how we said we'd go about it. We'd go to conferences. We'd talk to people. We'd tune up the marketing. We'd amplify the voice. Go ahead. And this is how we said we'd measure it. We'd measure it by looking at vacancies, we'd measure it by giving business feedback to you, and we measure it by reporting on some of the activities. This is what we said we'd do. So go ahead. So now we're going to talk about what we've been doing. The first thing we did is we polished up the marketing materials. We now have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, our website has been back up to date. So I know it sounds geeky, but I'm going to tell you, go on and like pictures and post stuff in it, because it does make a difference. Businesses who are coming here look at these websites and say, what can I think about you guys? They look at the town website. So the more pictures and photos they have on here, the better off we are. Go ahead. So now I'm going to have Tawny talk about, we've done this in 2 sections. One is on a retail focus and one is on a housing focus. So I'm going to let Tawny talk about the retail focus in the last couple months.
Yeah, and I do want to hit on the last part too. We were also invited to do a couple of podcasts, and those podcasts will be coming out really soon, primarily around housing and then, of course, business development. But yes, I have had the privilege of going out on the road to represent Freeport, and I could not have been more honored to take that task on. I attended the ICSC conference in New York City in December. I had previously attended the same conference in Boston 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was really surprised that when I went down there, not everybody actually knew that Maine was a part of the United States. They thought we belonged to Canada. And as LL Bean's biggest fan, they didn't know who LL Bean was. So I was very shocked to find that such a large group of business people would come all the way to Boston and not know these sort of basic things that I thought were so important. So fast forward 3 years, go down to New York City, so excited to be doing this work, but yet this time I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to tell them that we're part of the United States, and here we are. But to my great surprise, as I'm working down Retail Row, they call it, I hear the words LL Bean. And so, of course, I went up to the person immediately, and I said, I'm from Freeport. And I said, did I hear you talking about LL Bean? And he said, yes. And I said, why? And he said, because we're neighbors. With LL Bean's expansion now, their retail expansion around the country, they now have neighbors all across, and those neighbors are finding successful partnerships with having Beans next to them, and that's bringing up Freeport for us. Also, at that meeting, I had the privilege of attending a Gap meeting, which is Gap owns Athleta, Banana Republic, Old Navy, and the Gap. And the new CEO was a dynamic speaker, and I said, I'm going to go meet him. And I'm in a room of these Manhattan business owners, property owners, and I'm like, I'm going to meet him. And so I stood in line. There's one person in front of me, and I'm standing there making eye contact with him like I was waiting to meet Mickey Mouse. But by golly, the guy came over, and I said, then I'm like, what am I actually going to say to him? But I told him about Freeport. I told him where I was from, and to my surprise, he had actually visited Freeport over the summer. He said one of the most important things about doing business for him is real estate. And so it's important for him to see, different retailers from around the country. And he said he was very impressed with Freeport, and that was for 2 reasons. Number one, he was really impressed with our downtown. It's very well appointed. He liked the mixed uses and really saw a future in Freeport. And the second most important reason for him was LL Bean. LL Bean's investment in Freeport, the huge multi-million-dollar investment that they have made to stay put in Freeport, of course, resonated with him. And then, of course, the expansion from, around the country. So I would attend a few other conferences. I won't touch upon all of them because I know I'm taking up too much of your time, but I attended the Maine Outdoor Economy Summit, and a much different takeaway, but also a very important one as a town of Freeport, Maine. What I learned from that conference is basically anything you do with outdoor recreation has a very positive impact on your economic community and many other parts of your community. But it was such an important takeaway to me to realize that anything you do, from putting up bird feeders, will have a positive output. It'll have a positive, your customers are going to come more often, they're going to have a better experience, not to mention more elaborate things that you can do. But that was a great takeaway and a very different takeaway from that. I would go on to meet different forecasters about our financial future. It's similar to what we're going to hear a little bit later about development, but the financial future is here, okay? It's not going to get much better. But it's also kind of normal. We had a great little run with some low interest rates that were like, wow. Well, those days are behind us. And we now move on to trying to fill some vacancies. And to my surprise, you guys, it was kind of easy. I don't know what to tell you about one vacancy. We literally we have great relationships with property owners, and we actually filled a vacancy that's been, you haven't seen it yet because they'll be moving in the spring, but it's been empty for 10 years, and we were able to get it filled basically by a text message, going back and forth between the business that was wanting to come in and the property owner who's local, and we were able to put things together. It jumped over to email eventually, but a lease is being drawn up, and that's for 42 Main Street. And that will be a company called Freeport Footworks, which is really cool. It's way cooler than it sounds, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. Another one was pretty much that same thing. We were talking with a property owner who's Andy Wilbur. He said he's had a spot coming up that was going to be vacant. Kind of a unique space. It's a basement level space. It's on Bow Street, so super cool location. But I thought, oh, geez, that might be a little tricky. But no, it wasn't. Actually, Andy ended up helping the former user out so that he could roll in the new user that we found, which is Mother Tree Vintage. Great new use. And then the next spot that you're going to see filled for the first time is 35 Main Street. We've been working with Passive House for a couple of years, trying to find the right location for them in Freeport, and finally have found them a great home at 35 Main Street. Not only will they be opening as Passive House, but they've got a lot of other plans for educational courses and doing some collaborative space sharing with other businesses.
For those of you who don't know where that is, that's that empty space between Gap that's been there forever and ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a large square footage space, so it makes a difference when you start to talk about vacancy rates, because we do it by square footage.
Yeah, so you're going to start to see that little green arrow in a few slides is going down. And we have others that are in the works, but I have to say, as we're starting to talk at some of these, we don't have as much space downtown as we once did. It's moving. The needle is definitely moving in the right direction. Next slide. So as I said, what's resonating with retailers is LL Bean's expansion across, here and across the country. It's similar to a story that I was once told by Mike Marino, who's a property owner downtown now, and one of our oldest property owners, who in the 1980s, they had a challenge, a really big challenge. They went from being basically like a mixed-use downtown, a shoe factory, to now all of a sudden we have all these national brands begging to be neighbors with LL Bean. It sounds like an interesting challenge, but it was indeed a challenge. They didn't know what to do with all these big brands that were coming, willing to pay $10 a square foot more than the other person on the phone just to be close to LL Bean and be in Freeport. That problem or challenge is really, I feel like, starting to happen again. Retail is definitely alive. It's alive and well, and Freeport is on the map for that to be a destination for retailers. And I think we can just capitalize again, like on what our unique brand is to offer. But yeah, you can go on to the next slide.
So it's a busy chart for the vacancy rate, and you love this, but we've been tracking vacancies since FEDC has been tracking vacancies since Q3 of 2019. We tracked it through the pandemic, and look at your blue, and here we are. It's the first time, thank you. It's the first time we've seen these kind of rates in quite a while. And again, when you fill big spaces like that 10,000 square foot space, this is based on square footage. We think this is a more challenging measure than by space. And so it really helps us to take a look at it. Now, we'll start looking at the rest of Freeport once we get the downtown filled, but we want the downtown filled first. So, and we've had turnover with new spots coming into it. We've had new people coming in. You're seeing what we've done in the last couple of months. But in the last year, we've had some really great additions. Look at Melissa with her new, oh my gosh, that's just such a great story of a new purpose being used. We've had some wonderful changes that have occurred. We have a new tea company down. There's so many new places that we have. So this is really good news. We've got the right kind of turnover. And now our challenge is making sure that as we fill these things, we're filling them with the right kind of people, not anybody. We talked about before, principal always said 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 from national, regional, and local. Actually, we have about a third of these are national, about 42% are regional, and a little less are local, which is probably okay for us, because what we're hearing from people like the gentleman that owns Chilton's is he likes that, having the regional, because they can't find it anywhere else. Mm-hmm. You're not going to go to Kittery and find those regional people that are here. So we're moving in the right direction. We still have work to do, but moving in the right direction. Okay, so flip. Now we're going to talk about housing, because before we were talking about retail.
So to my surprise, again, I attend finance meetings. John's also, by the way, almost at all of them, and everyone loves him. We love him here in Freeport, but it's always nice to go outside the gates of Freeport, and it's like, oh, John Egan. They all love him in housing, which is awesome for us. We have been talking to all kinds of different housing developers, from low income to market rate to luxurious condo builders. And they are very, very interested in Freeport. We have a list of developers who are interested in and developing here and developing soon. And it was interesting because I asked a few of them, what would they want from us? What would you want if you could have anything to come to Freeport? And in the back of my non-developer's mind, I'm thinking they're going to say something outlandish like, well, you think you could get us like a free piece of land? And that's not what they said. That's not at all what they said. They actually said that the number one thing that they wanted was to be welcomed. They said that the profit margins are actually pretty tight on housing right now, because as we mentioned, the finance, we're not getting 2.6% rates anymore. And so because of that, how they're making projects work with this tight margin is they're building quite a bit. So like one of the developers that I spoke with, he needs to have 3 projects going at a time. So that's the emphasis on being welcomed. They can't afford to waste a lot of time not knowing if they can get through or not. So that was the number one thing from talking with low-income housing to high-end housing. It was the same amongst all developers that I've been speaking with.
Want to go to the next one? Sure, go ahead.
So I touched upon most of this here, but again, I do want to emphasize that our community said that they wanted housing, so we went back out onto the road after having some challenges with our last developer, and it was really an exciting time out there to think that we could have that development that everyone has said that they've wanted come to Freeport. We know that is what has been. I've probably told this story enough so that it's repetitive to you, but I do want to say it again. In order to have a thriving downtown, we've been told that we should have people living there. And we're not trying to become a new Freeport. We're trying to become what Freeport used to have. Freeport's history is actually the formula that we already have as a success for our future. We used to have 1,500 people living in downtown. We now have 300. So our goal is actually to go back to Freeport the way it used to be.
Thank you. And the last slide. So you asked us if we could ask you to do one thing for us, what would it be? So this is not quite one, but it's close. It's close. It's 6. But we've already talked about it some. We've got to continue to work in our lanes, and we have to do it in a collaborated way so that we're efficient in what we're doing and we make as much progress as we possibly can. It's really important with Bread in place now, with the town moving forward. This is the right thing for us to be doing, and we have to keep working in those lanes. We can't wait. We've got to make the changes that we know we need to make. Our folks in Freeport told us what they wanted us to change. Developers are waiting for us to do that. They're waiting for it to see these things. They want us to say, hey, we're open, we're ready, we want you here. So don't wait, keep working on it. Encourage the highest and best use of the land. You say we have a lot of parking lots downtown. We do, but it's a limited space. So anytime we get an opportunity with our developers, with a town, with owners, it's about what is the best use of this land and how can we encourage that. Show a big sign, demonstrate that we're open to change. I love Brett, start with a yes. That's a perfect way to start. We need to show that change out to the world of businesses and developers who are coming here, that we want their business. It makes a big difference. As Tani said, their number one ask, we want to be welcomed. Be ready to go. Time is money. These guys don't have time to go through ordinances and changes and be mired in whatever they can't be. The margins are too thin for them to do it now. And I think it's encouraging the right thing for all Freeport. The community is waiting. They've told us what we wanted, and we're on the cusp. So we just need to power forward. So it wasn't 1, it was 6. Okay. Thank you.
I feel like we should applaud after that. Thank you.
Excited.
Oh, I just spilled my tea everywhere because I was clapping for you. So that was great. Thank you so much for that presentation. And I think the retail piece, I feel there's like a little bit of weight off my shoulders. Yeah. Seeing that. Thank you. One question that kind of came up is I think you're doing a phenomenal job with getting retail space filled up. Do you have plans for retention or how you support the retention of these?
Housing.
Well, yes, but what you can do in terms of technical
Sure.
assistance and support.
I think there's a couple of things that really make a difference for retention. Housing is one of them. Many of the businesses opened in downtown Freeport because they believed in the downtown vision of what the housing was going to be. We need those people spending money. Yep. The second thing is supporting all of the actions of it's Meeting House Arts, it's Visit Freeport, it's the Chamber in bringing people here, all those events that we sometimes clog up our streets and such. They help to bring people into Freeport that the businesses don't have to worry about. And the businesses are busier because of that. So I think that's the second thing that we can do. And just really also, we're continuing to talk with them. And by having the chamber connected and visit Freeport, we talk to a lot of businesses about what they need. Not all of them are going to make it. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. However, we need to be doing everything we can as a town to make the town really business friendly for them. So, and I think we have a lot of control over that.
Thank you. I also want to give space for other councilors to ask questions as well. Great. I mean, I can just say that, Mary Davis and I sat down and had a great conversation the other day about, yes, we got to keep the pressure going, make sure that we're kind of building this momentum in the right direction. I think we are. We've talked about this comprehensive plan has been a huge lift for our planning board, taking up our most valuable resource, which is capacity, right? That's our most valuable asset we have in town, is the capacity of our volunteers, and cherishing that and getting past this comprehensive planning process that includes a lot of what we're seeing here. And I'm so grateful that we're seeing consistency in what we want. And then as soon as we get that comp plan passed, making sure council is ready to hit the ground running and start prioritizing. Yeah.
Can I just ask sort of a question, but sort of just a recommendation, I guess, is that as you talk to developers and retailers, do we highlight the things that we've already done? Because we have some stuff, we have plans, we know we have a lot of work ahead of us. We also have a lot of work behind us. We've reduced a lot of our parking minimums at the recommendation of FEDC. So we've got.
They're keeping up. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say the developers that I'm speaking with are very current on what the changes are, even the height change that, has
Yeah.
been recently put in place. So like I said, they're paying attention to Freeport. So yes, they are very aware. It didn't take work on my part to get them up to date.
Great, yeah. And I think the more we can all jump
Yeah.
at that, the better. 'Cause
Yeah.
we've got a number of things that we've already done. That,
And I think it is really important. It's that communicating out to the community about what you are doing. We used to have some pretty interesting coverage of newspapers when we did some great things. We haven't had that in a bit, and that really helps, because then it's not coming from us, it's coming from an independent.
Yep.
So I think as we do those things, we should make hay with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think just one last thought is, make sure, I spilled my tea. Make sure that, keep telling us how. That's part of your lane, right? Keep telling us how.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
And next up, any other thoughts on that before I move on? Nope. All right. Next up, we will move on to the Housing Committee update. Councillor Egan, he is going to move to the podium so we can actually make eye contact.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me. It's a little easier to talk to you when I can see you this way, and I'm actually representing about 7 or 8 people from the Housing Committee. So the Housing Committee was formed by the council a little over a year ago to get, or maybe a little longer than that, to get focused, 2 years ago actually, to get focused on recommendations to bring forward. We've done that a few times, and it's been a while and time for us again to come forward with some specific suggestions and recommendations, since we're just in the final turn here with the comp plan, maybe even beyond the final turn. You can see the finish line. It's right there. So we want to get these things in discussion with the council and with the community. And these are some very specific recommendations that were voiced from all of the members of the committee. Some of these may seem a little bold, but they're really not that revolutionary. The first 3 that I'm going to talk about are already in the dog bone report, which as a council we've already heartily endorsed. My effort here is to voice the conversations from the committee from the past 8 or 10 months and encourage the council to endorse a set of these to Sam Kapala and the planning board so that these ideas can be included in the comp plan and be prioritized for early action as soon as the plan is adopted. Love to see if that could happen like within 90 days. The committee and other stakeholders may have additional ideas to share next month about some additional policy priorities. This is an active group. We're dissecting everything. But we want to begin to socialize these recommendations at the council level, get them into the community conversation, and send a positive signal to the development community that Freeport is being proactive to invite new projects. I swear I didn't time this with FEDC's housing slide, but it does gel pretty nicely. Okay, recommendation number 1, hang on. Raise the building height limit to 55 or maybe even 60 feet in specific areas of VC1, namely Depot Street, possibly School Street, and maybe Route 1 below, meaning south of the railroad overpass. This would allow higher density projects. This is essentially a 4-story building with a pitched roof. That's what we're talking about. You could possibly try and get a 5-story building. 5-story buildings definitely involve an elevator and a lot of different construction, so that may be much too cost prohibitive, but a 4-story building with a pitched roof is what we're essentially talking about. Number 2, modify language for density calculations when determining how many units you can put on a specific lot to gross residential area rather than net residential area. Right now, our calculation is that you deduct wetland areas and steep slopes and or obvious portions of ledge because you can't build on them. But that means you have to shrink the size of your project on the area of the lot that you can build on. The lot is still the same square footage. It still has the same setbacks. It still has the same distance to neighbors and abutters. Why are we deducting that square footage when if you can physically fit whatever the square footage of units might be for the entire parcel, why do we have to deduct the unbuildable areas? So I want to make clear, this is not a recommendation, that we ignore environmental sensitivities and wetland areas or unstable slopes. The projects and construction still will not happen in those areas. There's lots of other laws to prevent that. But we can do something with the square footage on a gross residential as opposed to net residential. That was number 2. Number 3, in the Dog Bone District, which is part of the district that has been in conversation with the council. Members of the public, if you don't know what the dog bone is, we can get you a copy of that. Brett Richardson at Town Hall has plenty of them available. We'd love to send it to you. In the dog bone district, reduce the minimum lot area per dwelling unit to 0 or something very close to it, so that higher density projects can be proposed on those sites where you can physically put that kind of density. This obviously means within infrastructure, so we're talking about on sites that would have public water and sewer. That's the only place you can legitimately put that kind of density without chewing up acres and acres and acres for septic fields. Keep the same requirements for the setbacks and avoiding the wet areas and site access and visibility with the exits and whatever the market required parking is. So I'm not talking about changing all of those dynamics. It's just changing the dwelling unit per lot area so that you can maximize. If you can fit 25 units on a site physically and safely and not be building in a wet area or on top of a ledge, you should be able to put 25 units in there if you're meeting all of the other requirements. Number 4, and this is a big one. It's not related to codes. We just heard about some potential developers that are looking at Freeport and they're waiting for a signal. They're waiting for things to change. They're waiting. That's usually the first part of whatever you fill in the blank. They're waiting, they're waiting, they're waiting. Nobody's coming here. We don't have a development community in Freeport right now because people just aren't comfortable to take that kind of risk. So my suggestion, this is where I have to watch for things being thrown at me, is to have the town directly and actively pursue a housing project itself through a sketch design process, site identification, location, typology, rental or ownership. I think it's ownership. That's my individual vote. And then establish and engage in the permit process for such a project. Instead of opening the door and saying, here's our rules and here's our ordinance, and call me next Thursday when you get to the bottom of the page, we do that. And we go through and we have a small committee, very small committee with community inputs and lots of public charrettes to talk about progress. And we decide about the first housing project that's going to happen in downtown. And we go through the permit process as the town And then once it's permitted, then we have an RFP process and invite the developers to come in when the risk has gone from here to here, and the unknowns have gone from here to here. And it does require some money. And that's going to be the part that we'll have to talk about. We'll have to find out, where's Jessica? Oh, she left the room. We'll have to find out where we can find some money in our budget to do this. And maybe it's something that we spend now and get reimbursed later. These things are valuable. I believe if we were to have control of a site and we hand that over to a developer, I think that's got value, and I think we could get paid back for it. So I think that the possibility of doing these pre-permit specifics can be accomplished, and we can have this group hold a number of public input sessions and create a housing project by us, the town. And then we're telling what we want to have happen in our community instead of asking and waiting. So that's a big one to chew on. I'm not looking for any specific answers tonight, but I wanted you to know this is what the Housing Committee is encouraging and advocating for, and I hope we get to have more conversations about it. Thanks for indulging me down here.
Sure. Thank you, John. And I think, again, I'm really happy to hear that there's consistency amongst what I'm hearing from John and what we've been hearing for the last couple of years. I think it really just kind of highlights how we really, well, we're getting as close to consensus as we possibly could. And I think your last idea of the town-led development, we've been kind of tossing around for a little bit of time. That's not a brand new idea. And I think it's time that maybe we start thinking more in depth about it, of the how. And in talking with Sophie, we were talking about perhaps workshopping this as a council, and we have maybe more than 4.5, 5 of us present. So I would recommend that maybe next month we sit down as a council and start really thinking about that.
Fabulous.
Yep. Yeah, we'll do late March, and I think we'll work together to try and find a date for that.
There happens to be a pretty good blueprint in that the city of Bangor did this last year, and they have now selected their 2 developer partners to go. It's a much bigger scale. They had more money. It was a much more elaborate process because they're a big city and they had staff to do this. But the model has all of the milestones in it. And so I'd be happy to pull that down and bring that to the workshop.
Yeah, and I think even thinking about the FEDC presentation, best practices from other communities is always a great place to start. We don't have to reinvent the wheel if this is being done elsewhere.
Right.
I support that.
John, 2 questions for you. The change from net to gross on the density, is that town-wide or just downtown?
That would be, I think that was in the dog bone district. So that would be specific, to start there.
Mitch is like, why not town-wide? But to start in dog bone.
I think the specific areas to start with is where you could put density, and so the RR districts are not likely to take a lot more density. They're not being restricted.
That's not
like
the
most of the time.
threshold for them.
But that's maybe one of the other recommendations that might come forward is to have a fewer, maybe a lot fewer zoning districts, so that you might actually be able to remember 6 of them instead of 19 of them or whatever it is that we have. Sorry, Kyle. So I think that, I think it would start off in the places where it makes sense, but eventually move it wider.
Administratively, what's the best way to move it forward? So if we workshop it in March, do we then direct the planning board to take it up? Do we ask them to take it up first and then come to us? What's the sequence?
I have 2 suggestions on that because we had a lot of conversation about it. I'm been advised, this is not my strong suit, but I've been advised that the planning board, which is quite busy, will take up council directives for text amendments. Please go focus on this, and they will go do that. We did that with cannabis. We did that with short-term rentals. We did it with a number of topics. So they will do that. But I'm also mindful about all the other things that they're doing, as well as our planning staff. So I'd like to rely on some feedback from staff about exactly what that strategy looks like. I think it could be that simple. Mm-hmm. Getting it in the queue is probably a different story about where and how fast it happens. The other method is to go through we're going to propose this like we're going to propose, whatever. You can paint colors or whatever, other conditions we might want to put in there, and go through the back and forth. We have a public hearing, they have a public hearing, then it comes back. And that's a more inclusive process for sure. There's a lot more opportunities for public hearing, but I also think that the public is kind of looking for some action, too.
Yep, agreed. Thanks.
Okay.
So I'm just going to tell Brett now, because he's leaving on a trip in a few hours, that I think if we look at the second meeting in March, not an totally extra workshop, but I think we'll have plenty of time under other business in that second meeting in March.
The second council meeting?
Yep.
Great.
And if you have the contact and want to reach out for the Bangor material and get that to me, that's great. If not, I can also do that. I'm friendly.
I'll get it to you this week.
That's awesome.
Ann Krieg is a good friend of mine now.
I know Ann. But what I'm thinking is, if you give that to me when Brett comes back from vacation, we can do a little bit of internal discussion so that we come to that meeting with some guidance.
Great.
Great.
I just want to thank John and the whole housing group for continuing to push the fact that this is a desperate need, certainly all over southern Maine, but just as equally here in Freeport. I do want to say, acknowledging what the planning board already has been working on and continues to work on, that we have a lot of plans that have been fed into the comprehensive plan process. And I think where we're getting to now is the fact that we're also expecting a lot to come out after the comprehensive plan process, and we're trying to get our ducks in a row as best we can so that everybody can hit the ground running as soon as that major project is done. And that plan is going to help us inform density locations, target locations, but we already know some of that. We know the dog bone area, we know downtown, so we can start preparing for those places, I think, where we know we're looking for increased density. So I'm really appreciative of the work that you've done in giving us these really concrete recommendations.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I echo that 100%. That we have on March 19th, we are having a workshop on the comp plan that, Mitch, I think you can probably speak more to, but I believe is going to include implementation and recommendations that we want to add to the plan. So that's a really crucial time to make sure that we're looking at it with all of our lenses and it's including what we're talking about. So, what is that, 6 o'clock, 6:30?
6 to 8 p.m. at Meeting House Arts.
Great. Andy?
Yes, Andrew Osnall, and so I'm on FEDC and the planning board, and 2 or 3 comments. I don't think we need to wait for the comprehensive plan to be done on a lot of these issues. We know what we want. We need to get moving on some of this stuff. It's just another document.
Sit down now.
Oh, no, okay, I need some backup. And so we really don't need to. I mean, yeah, we're going to get it done. It's going to say what we want it to say. We all know what it's going to say, and we all know what we want. So to put this off for another 2-3 months, however long it takes, and then we got to have more hearings about the changes, and then the council's got to hear, we're going to miss another building season. You just can't keep dragging this stuff out because we're waiting for this or we're waiting for that. If we want to have people come here and build houses and build housing or go into stores, like Tony says, they got to go where they're welcome, and they got to stay where people appreciate them. Next thing is, we've done a lot of work in the last few years on housing in downtown, and no slant to John Egan here, but what's this say to a private developer that wants to come to Freeport and people that have been looking to come here and had a hard time getting through, and then the town walks up and waltzes through and says, oh, hey, I got a deal right here for you. We did all your work already for you, but I think we need to do both. I think we not need to send a message out that, oh, no, the town's going to do the developing now, and we're just going to look for a guy to pound nails. We need to make sure that private developers can come in here as well, and that's where we should be headed. So, if that doesn't work, Yeah, but I'm just, as a taxpayer and the guys that live in town a long time, I'd rather have the private developer build it. I think they can get it done quicker and faster if the door is open for them. And like I said, if we say yes to them and we get some of these impediments out of the way and don't drag our feet for another building season and get moving on stuff, it's got to be some changes. And they might be a little drastic, but they got to be some changes if people are going to come and build. So, next.
I came up here basically to say what Andy said. At least the issue of the net versus gross calculation, we should be doing that today. And let's have the public hearings, and if there's objections, let's voice objections. But it is consistent with the last comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the next comprehensive plan. And I don't think the comp plan will be adopted by the council until the fall. I mean, if you go through the stages, that's a long time to wait. And if that one, I think the building height could also be found consistent with the last comprehensive plan. But the net and gross calculation, that's at least a sign. We can say we are making changes right now. And I get frustrated that the planning board moves as slowly. I'm Mitch Ruda. I'm on the planning board. I'm on the housing committee. And so we move slowly. And I think one of the appropriate blockade is staff time. So I'm sensitive to staff time, but within the limits of staff time, I don't know why we can't do one or two things now that are dramatic, that give a signal that we are open for business.
Thank you, Mitch. Any other thoughts?
I'll just say, I can't agree with you more, Andy. The purpose of bringing this forward is because the committee feels strongly that we're not trying to replace or get in front of what the private sector can do. That's what we're trying to do, is show them that it actually can happen here. And if they come forward and say, wait a minute, I got a project over here, I don't want you in front of me, I'm like, great, we'll get out of the way, let you go do it. The whole point of it is to create the spark that gets somebody to come in with an application, site control, plans, budget that works, a lender, the whole thing.
But that takes some push from the council to say, we're going to get these rules straightened out, and we're going to get some impediments out of the way, and don't be just flubbing around all summer waiting for the comprehensive plan to be done. We all know what we want. You guys can mark it up. Planning board can hear it. We can move it along. And that's the spark that we need. That's one of the major things we have to have done. John and I talked about this when we were running against each other. Whichever one got on was going to work on housing, and that's what he's doing. But we all got to work on housing, and that means getting impediments out of the way now. Not this fall, not another season when we can't pour cement. It's got to happen now. So, if you want to pay FEDC, and we're doing all this stuff, and we're all working on it, it's up to you guys to, crack the whip and get some stuff done too. So
Yeah, and I think John and I have talked about this, and Mary and I talked about this. I know I personally get very excited and very eager to get things done, and part of my job is making sure I'm listening to staff of town, of capacity and restraints, and it's an interesting thing to try and balance. And I hear this. It's how do we keep pushing and also make sure we're not.
Well, but you have to just step up and say, hold a public hearing on density, nobody shows up to complain. If we think it's the best thing for Freeport, you just have to say, thank you for your comments. We need to get this done. You can't let 2 or 3 people derail what's going to be good for the whole town. You got to hear them out, and that's the polite thing to do. And I've been on the wrong side of some of these things, but we got to move forward with this stuff. If you're not, what the hell are we doing here,
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you. All right.
That's it.
Well, this was our new effort to try and streamline information exchange. Yes.
kicked
And
it
also
hard.
to make sure that our hardworking committees didn't have to always wait to the end of the meeting to speak. That was a very rigorous information share. Thank you all very much. All right, so moving on to the town manager's report.
So I'm going to pare down my report just a little bit. I will tell you that now that we've had a presidential election, Chris and her team are moving on to redistricting. It is what happens after every presidential election. We want to publicly thank Min Lee, our assessor, who's also a bit of an IT guru. who helped us come into this century and plot all of the voters on a map, which is going to make the job of moving 118 voters around in various configurations much easier. Just want to remind council that it is federal law that if you elect people via districts, they have to be the same number, approximate same number of individuals in each district. So we're going to go through a process where Chris is going to figure it out because she's good at it. We're going to bring that back to council. You'll decide whether, because there might even be a couple of options to choose from. We'll have some discussion. We'll move on to public hearings and get people's input. And then ultimately, council adopts the new voting districts. So, want to just give a shout out to our Public Works team. The last week, they've gotten a whole lot of snow in a very short period of time. People have showed up. They have done a great job.
They have. The roads look great. This morning, or yesterday morning, one day after that huge storm, and things were looking really good.
I am really impressed because I'm used to having quite a few phone calls after events like that. And I had one, which I referred to Earl because he does a good job managing that. I do want to just let council know that we have a mailbox policy in Freeport. So under state law, we are not legally responsible for damage that we do in the right-of-way. We don't behave that way in Freeport. What we say is if we hit mailboxes with the actual plow itself, not the snow from the plow, and Earl assures me there's a way to tell the difference, that we will replace that mailbox with maybe not the high-end mailbox that was there, but a functioning mailbox. Just to keep in mind that while mail is important to everybody, that comes in line with our response protocol, and so we're still making our way through cleanup and traffic safety, pedestrian safety, and then we'll approach those mailboxes. I'm surprised that they've hit as few as they have, to be honest. The fire department is working with Maine Water to address some concerns around the accessibility of fire hydrants. My understanding is Chief Bernard is making progress with that, and I've been really impressed with his proactive approach with that. After our workshop with Police Advisory Committee, Chris reached out to RSU 5, and they will post the openings and a little information about it on the FHS bulletin board, so we'll get some help there. I am really pleased to report and thank Councilor Lawrence because a District 4 representative has come in and filed an application for the Hunter Road Fields Advisory Committee, which we've been looking for a District 4 rep for a long time. Dave Lockman, longtime LLB employee that town works very closely with at the management level, has given us notice that he is retiring. I am very pleased to say that they're already thinking about the town and ensuring that we have new contacts to connect with. We are trying to get Councilor Benoit in with LLB in leadership. We had tried to do that before Dave's departure, but that's not going to work, so it's on the list to try. I'm also pleased to announce that Brett has been working double time and with Maine Department of Transportation, and we're going through the final review of the RFQ, request for qualifications for the Planning Partnership Initiative, which is the Route 1 corridor planning. That should be published by the end of this month. So then we'll put it out for a few weeks. We are going, they have a list of vendors. We've pulled some off that list. We're also looking at some national companies. It's important to us to get a wide distribution of this because if it's well done, if the selection process is well done, we won't have to do it again as we work through this process. And finally, Town Hall Beautification Project application has been submitted for Project Review Board consideration. Albert Pressgraves is kind of leading that project. We've submitted it, but they appear to be on the applications and in front of the PRB are kind of on the rise for March. So it will either be March if we can fit it in or April so that we can step aside for a private application if the agenda is full. That is not all I have, but all that you need to hear right now.
Any questions for the manager?
Quick one, what's the timing on the redistricting? Is that all before the election?
So it says that we have to do it every 5 years. I came before the last, excuse me. I came to you after the last presidential, and the numbers were so close that I said, let me come back after this presidential. So it's not on that exact cycle, but it was so close before. I felt like we should reassess now. So we do it every 5 years. Yeah.
So it'll all be done before the election or after the election?
Before June? Oh, I'm going to,
No, before the November election.
oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great.
I just want to echo Sophie's thanks to Public Works. I was going to say that earlier, but Earl wasn't in the room. So thank you for everything you're doing this particularly challenging season. It is appreciated, and I've heard that from a number of constituents.
I will relate it
How Portland looked? Yeah, I was down there too.
We in the glass house.
I know. All right, thank you, Sophie. All right, moving on to our next item is public comment. This is the first half of public comment for in-person attendees. This is limited to comments on items that are not on the agenda. We do have a sign-in sheet if folks want to speak and also want to make sure they get a follow-up. We will follow up if you sign in, and we ask that you keep it to 3 minutes. Is anybody here going to speak for public comment?
Good evening, Jay Yilmaz. Is this the right part of the meeting if I wanted to bring up a question about adding some stuff to the budget, the upcoming budget? Okay, so I had a couple of ideas, and I did run them by our Public Works Director, Earl Gibson, today, just to be sure it wasn't going to blindside him. I think he seemed receptive to these requests that I had or ideas that I had. I'm a commercial property owner and manager downtown on the Main Street, and I asked him if it was possible to continue the snow blower, the town snow blower, on all of the public sidewalk instead of just part of it, which, if you're not aware, some of it's done by the landowners and some of it's done by the town. And he seemed receptive to it, except he, like I, who manage people, winced and said, I just need more people. It's a budget issue. Please bring this up to the council. I believe he and I came to the understanding that it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to have more people on his team to have a good base for all that he and his crew have on their plates. And I would support that. I certainly don't support too much fat in any department, but this they do a great job. So I would support that, and I would really hope that you would consider this. As a matter of equity, I think a lot of the property owners would appreciate that, and I don't think they would leave it exclusively up to Earl, but to get the sidewalks at least initially open would get their crews ahead of it of the snow removal, and it would be helpful for the businesses and the tourists as well. The second thing ties in with Public Works is the Freeport Recycling Center and I may be a little ahead of myself. I should have asked Rod about this beforehand, but the swap shop has not been open on Saturdays, as I understand. It was closed for a little while during COVID, and I talked to Suzanne about it, and she said, the four-letter word again, help. I mean, it's hard to find people, and so this would be a way that potentially Public Works could get an additional person to maybe help with wintertime work as well as with the swap shop being open. I can't tell you how many things I've seen pulled out of the silver bullet. Of course, when the Public Works people aren't looking, but like legitimate things that people regrettably throw away that they would like to put in the swap shop, which becomes a whole other management issue with maybe trash being thrown in there. But I really believe it would be consistent with the values that Freeport has, along the lines of what Sophie was talking about, how it's not our responsibility to replace mailboxes, but we do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And it might cost a little bit of money, but it's certainly the right thing to do. I hope you very much consider it for this budget season. Thank you very much. Yeah, see you.
Thank you very much. And Sophie did mention that conversation about the sidewalks, and I think if council agrees, that's something that will add to the conversation for budget time. And I know I personally would love to see the swap shop more active and more robust. So thank you for bringing that up as well.
Yeah, it's one of the best outlets in Freeport for sure. And I think for the record, I don't ever think I spoke in under 3 minutes. So thank you for
Ken Sparta, I live down on South Street. I also own Freeport Oyster Bar. And I would just like to echo that. And one of the misses, Earl, do a great job. Like Public Works does a great job. But there were some misses in this last storm where crosswalks didn't get cleared. And some merchants took it upon themselves to clear a space out to the street. So we end up with people walking across the street where there aren't sidewalks, where there aren't crosswalks. So again, maybe a little bit more money and we can make things a little bit safer downtown.
Thank you, Ken. All right, any other public comment? All right. So now we move on to the new business portion of our agenda. So item 17-25, this is to consider action relative to adopting the February 18th, 2025 consent agenda. Councillor Egan, could you read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the February 18th, 2025 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
All right, looks like it's just some donations to fire and rescue and to the community library as well. Any discussion? Great. We'll do a roll call vote. Councillor Egan?
Yes.
Councillor Pilch?
Yes.
Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Councillor Benoit votes yes. All right, item 18-25 for action relative to a public hearing for a new liquor license. Councillor Pilch, could you please read the be it ordered?
I can. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for March 4th, 2025 in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, starting at 6 p.m. to consider a new liquor license for the Desert of Maine campground.
Second.
Thank you. Any background on this, Chris?
I have spoken with liquor licensing and ensured that they are using the correct application. Also, I know we talked about that.
Okay, sounds great. Any other discussion or questions? We have a copy of the application in our packet.
Did the application form change since?
Yeah, it does look different.
It looks different.
It looks fresh. I like it.
So what you're seeing is we've gone over to a completely electronic liquor
Right.
licensing process. So this is just the new printout that you'll see. No more old applications.
The premise type says golf course, so this would be, they have a lot of things happening on their business. So would it be for the mini golf and the campground, or what's the
It's
scope?
going to be for the store. They have a few tables there and the mini golf course,
Okay.
which the liquor inspector is going to go out and take a look at before our public hearing.
Great. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Councillor Egan?
Yes.
Councillor Pilch?
Yes.
Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Councillor Benoit votes yes. Item 19-25, to consider action relative to the fiscal year tax due dates and interest rates. Counselor Smith, does he have to read? He has to read all of them.
You could waive reading.
I can read it.
All right, he's going to read them all.
Be it ordered that 1/2 of the fiscal year 2026 committed taxes for real estate be payable on November 17th, 2025, with an interest at the rate of 0.625 per month or 7.5% per annum to be charged on November 18th, 2025, and that the second half of the fiscal year's 2026 committed taxes for real estate be payable on May 18th, 2026, with the interest rate of 0.625 per month or 7.5% per annum to be charged from May 19th, 2026. Be it further ordered that the fiscal year 2026 committed taxes for the personal property be payable on November 17th, 2025, with interest at the rate of 0.625 per month or 7.5% per annum to be charged from November 18th, 2025. Be it further ordered that an interest rate of 0% per month or 0% per annum be established for overpayment and or prepayment of taxes.
Second.
I had to read that one last year. I remember it. Jessica.
Yes, I feel bad sometimes for the length of the be it orders that I bring before you. But this is just establishing the interest rate for the FY26 taxes that remain that will at some point be unpaid. So it's an annual thing. The state sets the maximum rate allowed, and that's what this is based off of.
Any questions for Jessica? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
And our roll call vote, Counselor Egan.
Yes.
Counselor Pilch.
Yes.
Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Brown.
Yes.
Counselor Benoit votes yes. Okay, item 20-25, to consider action relative to the use of town property, a request from Meeting House Arts for the use of Memorial Park. I'll read the be it ordered. Be it ordered that the use of town property for Memorial Park be approved contingent upon receipt of proof of insurance.
Second.
Great. This is, we see this every year, I'm pretty sure. Chris, you want to add anything? Do we have it in our packet?
I have received their certificate of insurance, so since
Great.
the printing of the agenda.
Suzanne, we do? Okay. Suzanne, would you like to say a couple words?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for considering this. We love using Memorial Park for these concerts. The concerts this year are changing from Saturday afternoon to Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4. It will be every Sunday afternoon, starting the last Sunday in July all the way through the end of August. So we'll have a consistency of performances that the citizenry can count on. This is in addition to, by the way, Winslow Park, which we also manage that program. I will report tonight we have 100% filled all of the slots, performers for all of the performances, and they are top-notch. I'm going to pass a list around. This is hot off the press. First time anybody's seeing this, and we'll have it out to the public shortly. But I also want to have one copy for Christine for the files.
I have one.
Thank you. I'm very excited for this.
Can I have one? One other thing, benefit of being at town council meetings and hearing presentations like the FEDC presentation, is I realize that we need to add arts and culture to that website and to the attraction aspect of what Freeport has to offer to newcomers. So that will happen, and I just appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I just want to clarify, you said that last Sunday in July, you mean the last Sunday in June all the way through the end of August,
Last
right?
Sunday in June,
Yeah,
thank you
okay.
very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, last Sunday in June through the
Better.
end of August. Thank you very much for that correction.
Great. All right, we'll take our vote.
I'll just, for disclosure, I'm a volunteer, then I do the sound for these concerts, but I don't think that preempts me from voting on the use of the permit.
I agree with your judgment.
And can I add,
Yeah.
I attended a concert, or a couple of them, and they're really great. It's a really
We have
nice.
a really top-notch sound crew, can I say that?
And audience.
So we'll even start with you, John.
Yes.
For a vote. Counselor Egan.
Yes.
Counselor Pilt.
Yes.
Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Brown.
Yes.
Counselor Benoit votes yes. Okay, that concludes the voting portion of tonight. So that was very quick. So we will move on to the public comment period, our second half, which is for virtual attendees. Is there anybody interested in speaking?
So, it's Jim.
It's just Jim. Hi, Jim. We appreciate you. All right, so we'll move on. So other business, we have 3 items. The first is a solid waste and recycling update from Rod Regier, who was the first person to come to our Coffee with Council office hours. So thank you very much for that, and the podium is yours.
Rod, do you want me to put up your graphs?
Oh, if you could, that'd be wonderful. Right. I think I've been told don't adjust the mic even though it's for different sized people.
So it's all set the way it is, yes.
All right.
And I will say we have the printouts on the dais as well for folks who want to follow along.
I'm Rod Regier. I live in South Street. I represent Freeport on the board of Eco Maine. Madam Chair, I'm going to backtrack just for a second before we go into this, because again, we're on television here. Eco Maine is the point where probably 250,000 people in Maine have their trash disposed, either burned or recyclables handled. It's owned by 26 communities, including Freeport. It's governed by a board of directors, and I've been appointed by Freeport to represent Freeport's interest in the board for a while. As we're talking about this, we're going to be using the term tipping fee. I want to make sure that everybody knows this is not just jargon. A tipping fee is what's charged. Every load of recyclables or trash at Eco Maine is weighed, and a tipping fee is the charge per weight to drop it off there, and then Eco Maine deals with it. You weigh, you pay, you leave. Everything else is Eco Maine's problem. The tipping fee is what's charged for that drop-off. From Eco Maine's revenues, Eco Maine's about a $30 million company right now. About 2/3 of that is tipping fees. It's tipping fees from residents. It's tipping fees from businesses. It's tipping fees from, there are a variety of contracted communities that are not owners. Brunswick just joined, in fact, and under contract for a period of time, their municipal waste is taken out to Eco Maine, weighed and charged also. So anyhow, about 2/3 of Eco Maine's revenues come from tipping fees. The rest comes from either the waste is burned, it runs a steam turbine which operates an electrical generator. So Eco Maine's revenues include the sale of electricity, and then also Eco Maine has a recycling area where recyclables are separated, baled, and sold, and the revenue from the recycle sales is also a major piece of the revenue stream for Eco Maine. And then there's minor stuff like tower leases. For your purposes on the town council, we're only talking about residential waste here in Freeport. Commercial waste is not part of any public budget. If you have a business in town, you pay your contractor, Casella or Waste Management, whatever. You pay them to pick it up. You pay them to transport it to Eco Maine, and whatever is the tipping fee is passed on to you. So for the purposes you're budgeting, commercial waste in Freeport is simply not part of the discussion. For residential waste here in town, the practice has always been that residents pay to get their waste to Eco Maine. You may deal with Danny Wentworth or the man who bought his company, Cody Smith. You deal with Pine Tree. You might go over to the transfer station where there's the small compactor. But all of those charges are the transport charges. What shows up on your budget is the tipping fee. The tipping fee for waste and also the tipping fee for recyclables. As Freeport's representative, I'm perfectly happy to let sleeping dogs lie, and I tend to come to the council only when there's something happening. I show up when there's a problem, and there's something that will have an effect on your budget and perhaps an impact on how residents of Freeport, just citizens here, are dealing with their waste. EcoMaine is in the process of building a new recycling center. We're in the middle of a $35 million bond issue, and that has changed the dynamics of the operation. And the consequence is that the tipping fees, quite apart from inflation, are going up. The year we're in right now, the tipping fees that are in the town budget were about $40,000 more than last year. The budget you're going to be working on is going to show a $40,000 increase, and the budget after that is going to be probably another $50,000 increase. Some of this, as I say, is inflation, but a lot of it is because of the cost of the paying for the new recycling center. So it's fair warning about that. And it's something that there are a variety of ways you can brainstorm to think about how to deal with this. I'm not really here to talk about that, but just to introduce the need for this, what I think is the need for this conversation. And it could be that you decide that this is simply acceptable costs, and so be it. But I just want to make sure that you're aware of these changes. There is one dark horse which is working its way through on a statewide basis. It's called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. It is a packaging parallel to the bottle bill, where any company, any industry that is selling goods in Maine, if they are packaged in something which is recyclable, there's a charge. This was approved by the legislature. The Maine Department of Environmental Protection has its rules in place. I think there's a lawsuit going on contesting it right now. But there is a possible revenue stream to help subsidize, to help reimburse towns that have recycling programs. I've been to only one presentation, and nobody at the state level who's been involved with this is making the hint of a commitment about what kind of money is involved, whether it's $200 or $2,000 or $20,000 of reimbursement. If this goes according to plan, the first revenue reimbursed from extended producer responsibility won't be until your fiscal 2027. But it's something. It will reimburse recycling costs. So you've got to make sure you've got to have a recycling program in the first place. But that is a dark horse. I can't tell you anything more than what I've told you right now. The first graph there, solid waste is astonishingly uniform through the years. We're dealing somewhere over 17,000 tons of waste are going to the incinerator a year, and there's something like 750 tons through the years are going through for recyclables. Could you go? I don't have a computer control here. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is the one that hurts, because these are the tipping fees from EcoMaine. It was stable for really quite a long time, 10 years ago. EcoMaine, the board, in order to encourage recycling, there was no recycling tipping fee for years. It was only 5 years ago the first recycling tipping fee was introduced, but that's what is skyrocketing, going from $35 a ton. It's going to be it's projected to be $130 a ton in 2 years. So this increase in the tipping fee for the recyclables is what is the catalyst for my wanting to talk to you about this. Can we go to the next slide, please? And again, this just transfers the tipping fees to numbers, and that's what I was describing to you earlier, where there's about a $40,000 increase for last year, this year, and a projected $50,000 increase for fiscal 27. And could you go to the last slide, please? Can you get the whole thing up there, please? Okay, thank you. We can't talk about solid waste in town without talking about the silver bullets. I know that there are counselors who experienced the silver bullet conversation in the past, and it is never introduced with any pleasure. But the increase in the tipping fees and the transportation costs, it is insane what we are paying basically to ship air to Eco Maine. So I personally hope that as we talk about recycling Freeport, there are a lot of different levers we can pull, but I think that one of them is necessarily going to be the way the recyclables are handled. 5 years ago, we had 4 silver bullets around town, and after a lot of difficult conversations, 2 of them were removed. We had silver bullets at Hunter Road, West Street, the compacted silver bullet, the transfer station, Doherty's, and South Freeport. Those last 2 were removed, and there was a lot of concern about what would happen to those recyclables. It's hard to. There was a lot happening in 2000 and 2021. I mean, quite apart from COVID and people staying home, so there's a lot more residential trash during that period, almost no commercial trash during that period. This is during a period there was a great concern about contamination of the recyclable stream, so there was a real effort to get a handle, to actually reduce the recyclables to what was real recycling. So there was a lot happening after those 2 silver bullets were removed, but I think that it's clear that a large part of what had gone to those 2 silver bullets simply transferred to the remaining 3 locations. And I don't know that anybody's been able to say that with any confidence, but it's pretty clear that yes, recycling, you can argue recycling dropped off a little bit, but I think the larger result is that, in fact, the recycling, it basically transferred, it moved from one pocket to another. So I'm hopeful that this information, again, as you talk about how to handle the recycling here in town, that will give you some factual basis for your decisions. So.
Rod, earlier on the slide, thanks for this great information. Earlier on the slide, you indicated the rapid rise in the tipping fee for recycled materials. Am I following a logic then if we're paying more, we're approaching actually paying more for recycling tipping fees than we are for solid waste?
It is a board discussion at Eco Maine for exactly what that represents. But yes, that is.
So that would obviously indicate what we do with local recycling collection if the cost of that is, let me back up. The purpose of originally having the collection points, the silver bullets as you call them, the containers to collect recycling as broadly dispersed in the community as possible was to encourage recycling to happen as conveniently as possible. And because I was on the council during the time when those 2 containers were removed, I still don't think there's been an issue that I've gotten as much feedback on as that issue in 10 years on the council. So it's something that people pay attention to, but if it didn't hold up, that the discontinuation of 2 containers in relatively disparate parts of the community geographically didn't really decline the amount of recycling, it seems like people figured that out. But now we have a different issue, which is that if we're collecting recycling and shipping incomplete or unfull containers, and it's costing even more to dispose of it, doesn't that sort of beg the question of how we are collecting recyclables, and maybe the whole community container thing is really not that viable anymore? Is that the next couple of steps on the logic?
You could have my seat on the board at Eco Maine, because for the communities that are farther from Eco Maine, where it's $170 a trip for the truck, even before you pay the tipping fee. And it makes recycling actually, from the town budget standpoint, because the town budget for recycling is paying transportation plus the tipping fee.
Yeah.
From the town budget standpoint, I mean, I'm going to say something I don't believe in, but it makes no sense to recycle.
Yeah. That's the next couple of steps on my logic path about
yeah, right.
why we continue to uphold this model. That, 10 years ago, I was out there screaming, we should be doing this. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's a totally legitimate point, and I've long believed in an ethic of recycling, and if the ethic of recycling is if I save money, that's great, which we have been able to. It has been cost effective. If it's comparable, and even if there's even a little bit of a premium, I'm willing to do that. But they reached the point that the cost, at least the way we're handling it, doesn't make sense. The one thing that I didn't point out over there, but the box actually, I'm sorry, I hate these screens that are full of numbers, but the point for the box is you go through what the effective cost is to the cost per ton. The cost per, by the time you pay the transportation
This mic on the other side of the podium there, on the left side.
Oh, okay.
Sure it's on.
I think it's all set.
Should be on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
The effective cost of goods, I'm sorry. The transfer station compacts the recyclables. And it means that the average weight for the trips going down there, we're taking over 2.5 tons of recyclables. $170 is moving 2.5 tons. For the non-compacted silver bullets, $170 is moving 3/4 of a ton.
Yep.
And
okay, that's what I thought.
This is where, again, you can argue that yes, there's a premium, maybe an acceptable premium, if in fact it's compacted trash. And how you manage the compacted trash, how many locations, how long one location is open. I mean, again, it's a huge matrix of possibilities. One of these brainstorming points where there's no wrong answer to start off with. But I think it's important to understand that the recyclables run through the compactor. It's a different economics than the recyclables put in a silver bullet, because the silver bullets, as you see, we're hauling air at $170 a trip.
Rod, can I follow up on the point that John just made about the cost of the tipping fees for recycling versus municipal waste in 2027 and presumably beyond? Is the theory, the discussion that the board is having now, that reflects the cost of recycling, what it costs them to manage the recycled goods as opposed to the solid waste goods? And sort of follow on to that is, does that include the $35 million new facility, and is that distributed among both streams or focused on one stream?
That 130 estimate is the estimate of the actual cost to EcoMaine to operate the facility. Right now, with a 20-year-old facility, fully depreciated, it costs about $90 to $100 a ton to process the recyclables. It's a horrible, volatile market where there are times that basically paper is given away for nothing. But then last week, we were selling milk bottles for, I think it was $2,500 a ton. So you just hope there are a lot of milk bottles and not a lot of paper. But yes, I think it's intended to reflect the cost, a genuine cost of operation.
And the new facility, the $35 million facility,
Yes.
is that mostly spent on the biomass production of energy, or is it mostly focused on the separating of recycles?
$35 million, 24 of it is for the recycling center.
Really?
7 or 8 is for an ash fill expansion. After you burn the trash, there's about a 90% reduction, but there's still this hazardous waste that has to be, hazardous ash that has to be handled. Very, very heavy. you've got to be careful to be able to stack it where this, so that it's isolated from the groundwater beneath it. So making it's about a 4 or 5 acre site, which is just about to open, and it's about 7 years ash capacity, and it's about $7 million of the bond is for that ash fill. And the rest was for some work inside the plant. I don't know whether any of you have ever been to EcoMaine, but it's very much worth a visit to see the site, to see the plant, and also to see the ash fill, and just understand just what a huge industrial operation this is. I mean, waste is a commodity, and the only way you can handle it is just, you have a lot of it go through as efficiently as possible. But even the tipping floor where the trucks come in and drop off in the plant, it's a concrete floor, but you've got front end loaders scraping across it, and the concrete wears out. And there was $1.5 million spent basically resurfacing the tipping room floor with some kind of a hardened, I don't know if a metal impregnated concrete or something to make it more durable. It's a different level. It's a different level of capital expense than what a municipality or particularly a school district works with, where, yes, there are large employee expenses, but the basic cost, the larger cost down there is for the capital operation. And if things go south, they go south really rapidly. Several years ago, because the high-pressure steam, the turbines actually wear and have to be basically reconditioned every 6 or 7 years. So it's planned. It's $1.5 million operation. Truck the turbine down to Mississippi someplace. The plant doesn't operate for a month. The turbine comes back. Anyhow, there was a problem with the operator, and the plant was down for almost 4 months, and there was a $10 million loss, and EcoMaine's in the process of suing the company that actually damaged the turbine. EcoMaine, this is totally an aside, but EcoMaine is part of this larger economic community of our world. $6 million of recycling machinery has just been contracted from a Montreal company. There was a bid from a couple of West Coast American companies. They were hired, but the main thing is the Montreal company wanted the work, and there's a lot of follow-up, and they wanted the work. Anyhow, figure out what a 25% tariff is on a $6 million operation. So that's one of the contingencies in the contract right now. But anyhow, I'm sorry, that was getting far afield. Other questions about this?
Not a question, but I just want to say thank you for years of probably the most knowledgeable person about recycling and municipal waste that I've ever met. And thank you for the detailed presentations and information. It's always an education, and I really appreciate you having our backs at the board.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rod. That was great. And I know this is our last couple of months with you, so Sophie is working on finding a worthy replacement on EcoMaine. So I just want to thank you for your knowledge and dedication. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Councillor Brown, did you have any thoughts or questions you wanted to share?
Just thank you very much, Rod Regier, for your knowledge and representing the town of Freeport. Really grateful.
Great. So I think, he brought up a very important and costly change as up and coming, and I think it's up to council if we want to sort of just keep it as, all right, knowledge, we know, or if we want to discuss further in some capacity. I leave that on the table. So. All right, Brett.
Well, Brett's getting ready. We talked, John's going to slap me, but we talked a couple of years ago about...
Yeah, I can't reach you.
It's a good thing. A compost program. I know we have garbage to garden behind the public safety building, which diverts heavy waste from both streams. It's not municipal solid waste, and it's not recyclable. It goes and gets reused as compost. So the more we use that, the more tax money we save, So that's a clear win for everybody. And it's so much of a win that we talked about, well, can we expand that and have it be a curbside program, which caused a lot of consternation and confusion, I think, and misinformation about what it was and wasn't. But that is one of the levers that we could look at, though it obviously costs money to do that. So I'll just leave it out there for potential
I
consideration.
think all those ideas are on the table with these economics, which are flipping our assumptions from not even 6 years ago. 180-degree flip about what we think is the most cost-effective and the most convenient and what makes the most sense, et cetera. So,
And I think,
sorry.
did I go out of order? No, I didn't. Sorry.
No.
And I think, too, what really stuck with me is, we're paying to ship air. So how can we address that? Can we do anything about that? I think there's an obvious problem right there.
yep. It was one of the contributing factors of why we went from 4 to 2.
Yeah. So. All right.
All right.
Anyway, Brett.
He's dealing with some technical issues from his navigator here.
We can go ahead right to that next slide if you'd like.
It's a very sharp-looking deck.
Do I want to just play?
Slideshow,
Check that out.
and all the way on the left, there you go.
Thank you.
Go over one. There we go. So it was great meeting you the other day. The welcome I received on my first trip to Town Hall was above and beyond my previous experiences with local town governments. Truly encouraging for a new Freeport business owner. That's a quote from December of 2024. And I'm the development director, Brett Richardson, who's in my first 6 months with the town, and happy to provide an impact update to you tonight. So thanks for the opportunity. So the development director position is relatively new in Freeport. It's housed in the town manager's office, and it's focused on some interrelated activities that will create a good environment in town. Business retention and expansion, development and attraction, policy and planning, and then interdepartmental coordination among planning and codes. So business retention and expansion, if you look at the stats economically, most data, or most jobs rather, come from existing businesses in town that grow. More so than attraction, more jobs come from local businesses. So focusing on keeping local businesses in Freeport. So if you want to switch the slides, one more, Deb. Yep, so focusing on keeping businesses in Freeport, understanding their needs and identifying solutions to help them, and then facilitating access to resources and remove barriers to growth. So since July through January, I've interacted with 28 local businesses to understand what their need and help develop some solutions for them. So that's a quick update. Some highlights of that. AEC Engineering, a great local business that's been in Freeport for 25 years or more, who needed a zoning change to expand. They wanted to stay in Freeport. They couldn't do so without the help of the town, and so we were able to help facilitate a smooth process with them. They came to the table with great ideas and a good spirit. We reached a good landing that was unanimously supported by the planning board and the town council. A similar story with a great local brand, Maine Beer Company. They are doing really well, creating great jobs in town, expanding their product around the country, and they needed to grow. And so they were looking at a parcel that was zoned in a way that wouldn't allow them to meet their needs. And so we helped them come through with a thoughtful proposal and get support from the community, which is great. And then MADE, makers, artists, designers, and entrepreneurs. This is an offshoot of the Freeport Market in Village Station. Melissa aggregates local products from makers throughout the state and then provides a really good platform for them to sell. And does a great job for them. So she, even through COVID, did really well in Village Station and has recently purchased a new space right across the street, the old Linda Bean space. And we helped connect her with some gap financing that helped make the purchase of that building possible. It's really exciting. On the business or the development and attraction side, we work on outreach, putting together financial resources to help businesses locate, and then approval process guidance to support new projects through town policy, through town processes. The Fit Up Grant Program, we've talked about that a fair amount, has had a lot of impact. We'll talk about that more in a minute. matchmaking property owners with prospects, and then permit process support. So some highlights there. We've worked to support the development and attraction of 8 local businesses. We've deployed, just since July, $40,000 in town fit-up funds that are matched about 3 to 1 typically, and then engaged with property owners and developers to look at parcels and opportunities in town. And I've got some optimism. I think we're going to see some good stuff happening pretty soon. And then most recently, we facilitated a CDBG application to help bring a much-needed child care facility to town. So doing some good work there. Policy and planning, another important aspect of what we do. We want to create the right environment. We heard the earlier conversation tonight about how Freeport has policy updates ahead of us, and so working to coordinate across planning and codes to help that process move forward is a big priority. We set on the management teams for the comprehensive plan update, the design review ordinance update, which is really important. It's something that we haven't talked about recently, but in addition to the planning, the comprehensive plan update, the planning board's also working through a design review ordinance update, which is what governs what buildings look like downtown, and that's a hot topic. And so getting that piece of work complete and creating a regulatory environment that does create that confidence and clarity is a really foundational cornerstone to a healthy economic environment here in town. So that's a big one. Implementing the downtown vision, we'll have a couple highlights from that in a minute. And then transportation and transit-oriented development are part of the day-to-day. So marrying land use and transportation, we heard a little bit about the dog bone report that was endorsed by council unanimously after about a 3-month process, moving expeditiously. Sophie, town manager, mentioned the Maine DOT Planning Partnership Initiative, which we're about to roll out with an RFP. I think we're going to get a good consultant there who's not only going to help us look at the transportation corridor, but actually the land within 1,000 feet. Which is really innovative for DOT and a town to partner on a coordinated development design married with transportation. That's exciting stuff. Downtown vision, the parklet's coming back. Last year, Maine DOT was navigating the end of COVID and was clarifying how they were going to regulate those parklets. We were unable to put that in place. Through our network and education and advocacy, we were able to get that reinstated. So we're planning. So that's good news. Subdivision exemption. You guys last meeting approved the exemption of multifamily projects from subdivision review. This is another fundamental change. Prior to that change, a project would go through site plan, subdivision, and then oftentimes design review. And subdivision and site plan were in many cases redundant. So it was the same review again with an additional public hearing, which costs money, takes time. So the fact that you guys rallied behind and approved the subdivision exemption is a pretty good one. And then pretty soon we'll also have a downtown infill parking analysis to share with you. And I think it's going to validate what we all know and believe, and that is that we have to maintain an adequate supply of parking, but that we've got some room to play with how we do that, which is exciting. We validated that. We worked on getting the parking lowered for multifamily projects a couple of years ago. This study, I think, validates that and builds confidence that, hey, we care about our retail, we care about our brick and mortar, but we can absorb housing and still be able to keep them healthy, which is really exciting. And then the goals for the next 6 months, we'll let Sophie keep up. We're going to do maybe about 2 or 3. There we go. That's only 1. Nice job. So core activities, right? We're going to look at to work with retaining and expanding local businesses, making sure they have an advocate in town hall that will help them get through a smooth process. We're going to work on development and attraction. We have currently, with the Fit Up program, you guys, I think, made a wise investment to put up $120,000 to support business commercial space fit-ups at 1-to-1 matches, private to public. Actually, so far, to date, of that 120, almost $79,000 have been committed or spent. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 businesses. And that $78,000 in town funds has been matched $3.10 to $1. So pretty significant impact there. And our goal for the year is to deploy the other 41,000. This slide's about 4 hours old, so the other 41,000. And then we're going to work hard to bring housing to downtown. We're going to work hard to bring new businesses to downtown. And we're going to identify and support 3 housing development projects in the next few months. Department coordination. We're going to roll out iWork Online, so that's going to make it's an online permitting platform. That'll make it easier for folks to get their permits, alleviate some staff time. Another key point here is we're going to fully staff the planning department. We have a new exciting young person who's going to be coming to town starting in March, so a few weeks away. Kyle Drexler, our planner, has been in the seat for about 6 months. He staffs both boards. He's done a great job. Having the staff fully supported in March is going to be really exciting and add critical capacity to our department. And then also cross-committee collaboration. I'm lucky enough to staff the Housing Task Force and the Complete Streets Committee. And it's fun to see where there's alignment across goals. And I think that there are a lot of common ground that once this comprehensive plan is complete, that we'll be able to have a smooth path to getting a lot of policy implementation completed and be off to the races. So that's the goals for the next 6 months. Any questions? Comments?
2 things, Brett. One is I appreciate how you intentionally and particularly describe the parking infill analysis as we have lots of parking, and we want to make sure we support our businesses by not saying something that might be, let's say, converse to that, like we have, potentially X. So I think that's a really good idea, and I think in the right places, because we've looked at parking previously when we were reducing our standards for downtown business requirements. We had a parking analysis. So I think that's a really useful, and it's a canary. It tells us exactly kind of what's happening when we can take 50 parking spaces away and do something else with it, and you find out the world didn't stop spinning when we took away 50 parking spaces and did X. So, or we, but whoever did. So I think that's really valuable to be aware of both sides of the parking issue. And then the second thing I'm really glad to see, I didn't know that's how you spell the word liaise, so learned something new tonight. Thank you for sharing that. Liaising with FEDC, we heard a very detailed description from FEDC at the top of this meeting about what they're doing, and I don't know if you worked on it or not, but it lines up very well with what you're doing here. So I just want to ask the question, is that do you have to go way outside your lane to do that, or is that something that's pretty easy to do, to coordinate and collaborate with FEDC and their activities, because they're running?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think they're doing great work, and I think, we attend their board meetings and stay in close contact with Tawny. I mean, I think there's an example, Mother Tree. She mentioned them taking a space in downtown. What's kind of cool about that is the story before that is that the town council last summer allowed her to do a pop-up tent in Hot Dog Park behind Starbucks. So that's that same business who we collectively sort of nurtured from a pop-up start to getting her into a retail space. So I think that there's a lot of that's going on, and I think being in town hall when these housing projects that we talked about, start to come in, I think there'll be a smooth handoff there and a lot of collaboration. So yeah, FEDC is a great partner.
Great.
If we're going to keep up with the lanes analogy here, I feel like you're like the dotted white line, where we can kind of pass the lanes and get into the lanes. So that's what I think of you. And I think this really shows that we're getting there. We're building the momentum. This is the snowball that we're building. And I think this is, with everything we're talking about earlier, we're moving things along. So thank you.
One last slide, too, I forgot to mention, and this is relevant to what's going to happen in March, and that is that you'll likely see me come back and work on facilitating a local approval for an affordable housing tax increment financing project to support the Varney Heights senior housing project. So that's one project coming to fruition that the town can actively help in that process.
So I think I'm going to add two things if I can, just because they're up here, but you haven't called them out, and they're two of my favorite pieces. One is when you talk about supporting projects, whether town-led or private-led, I really think looking at the TIF policy, looking at transit-oriented development district renewal is going to be critical. So that's on our plate for the next 6 months so that we'll have that financial tool that I think will help fund some of the things that council wants to do. The other piece is a collaboration between our economic development or our development director and our communications team, and that's the Growing Freeport Together series, and I'd like you to just point that out because that is not something that we likely would have been able to partner as effectively on prior
Yeah,
to now.
I appreciate that. I usually just kind of speak from the top of my head. I didn't realize I had an extra slide here, so it's good to have the prompt, and I appreciate that. So we have filmed 2 business profiles with 10 more to go. We're going to start rolling out 1 business profile a month. It's going to be Growing Freeport Together is the idea. It's local businesses that are investing in Freeport and then accessing the resources of the town to help them grow. And they're great stories. You get to see an entrepreneur in their business space, learn about what they're doing, hear their passion, hear how it's been in Freeport, and then hear about their next step. So it's really Freeport's got a lot of great stuff going on and a lot of great energy and a lot of great entrepreneurs. And working with Pete, the new communications director, we're going to really start pushing those stories out.
Can I ask one more parking question? Because I know
Sure.
we love talking about parking. It sounds like we're going to have a good beat on, obviously, the inventory of parking we have, an idea of how much we might need under different scenarios. Is there anything in the report or that you have access to that would tell us how many excess parking spaces we have as compared to our policy today? So what I'm trying to figure out for myself is, have we already created the space to be able to convert some parking into a different use, or do we need further policy adjustments to create that potential?
That's a wonderful question, and that's an internal staff debate right now about what to do about that. I think there's an opportunity to, going back to what John said, and this is an important point, that respecting the property owners in town and their vested interests in their businesses is critical. And so I think that the question that you asked is also critical, but we have some time to let a few projects play out. We've actually got an interesting data point already because we have the LLB in Big Tent, which consumes parking, and then we have a parking lot down here on Depot Street that's been blocked off for a year, which also consumes parking. And I think the recent holiday season validates the fact with those 2 footprints in place that we do have enough parking to play. There's also one other important consideration that to put on the table, and that is that there's going to be a tension between 350 days of the year and 15 days of the year. The 7 before the holidays and the 7 on that rainy week in July, where we're jamming, and we need every parking spot that we can, versus the other 340 when we have excess parking to boot. So there's some strategies in this report as well about how to get the best of both worlds and manage those peak days without handcuffing ourselves to limited development most of the time.
Great. Thanks, Brett.
Well said. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Last but certainly not least, we have Jessica with the initial presentation of the draft capital plan.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I'm bringing forth to you tonight a high-level overview of our capital planning process and the FY 2026 capital plan. As I always do, I like to start out with the definition of a capital item, which is an asset with a depreciable life of more than 1 year. Items are commonly over $5,000 to $10,000 in value, and these consist of items that are non-routine in nature. If they are accounted for in the general fund, they would cause our tax rate to fluctuate drastically year over year. So those are some of the criteria that we look at when considering items to go within the capital plan. I'd like to take a moment to really kind of pinpoint the goals of my goals of the capital planning process. It's really to establish and help maintain a stable tax rate, which I know is and has always been very important to council to be able to maintain that tax rate for residents. We also like to ensure that equipment and projects are planned for in advance. This gives us the opportunity to really evaluate what we have on hand and what that repair and maintenance schedule is really going to look like for those items. It allows us to reserve appropriate levels of funding for these projects in advance and to assist us in avoiding unnecessarily borrowing money or issuing debt when it doesn't make sense to do so. And it allows us to be proactive in replacement rather than being in a situation where we experience escalating maintenance costs or downtime because things happen without them being planned for. So those are really our goals for our capital planning process. On this slide, we have a summary of the 2026 five-year capital plan. As you can see, the total of the articles for FY 2026 is $2,661,000. The total five-year plan is actually $13,209,000. And on the lower half of this chart, we have a new breakout of the recommended funding sources for the items within the plan, with the majority of the funding coming from our reserves. The next slide is just a pie chart graph of the 2026 proposed budget. I just want to make a note on this that 56% of the capital plan for FY26 is encompassing your roads, your facilities, and stormwater improvements. So that's a pretty large chunk of the capital plan. It really is going directly into your roads and things that are going to be noticeable by your residents. The next series of slides are just going to take you through each article. So what you'll see either in the middle or on the sides is really going to be a high-level overview of the five-year plan items that are in the five-year capital plan, with a quick note of what the 26 proposal actually encompasses or value-wise. So in the police department, for the five-year plan, they're looking at getting protective gear, which is inclusive of bulletproof vests and helmet and night vision equipment, as well as communications equipment, including audio-visual, some firearms, radar speed enforcement units, and the annual vehicle replacement program. The FY26 proposal itself is $120,000 for the police. Moving to the fire department, their proposal for the five-year plan includes air packs, protective equipment, some communication upgrades, hose replacements, some hazard remediation, and vehicle replacement program, with their FY26 proposal coming in at $184,500. This is a picture of the gear washer. That's one of the items that they have. So I tried to incorporate relevant pictures so you can see some of the things that we're talking about and looking and needing to replace. The police version was just a picture of the boat, and it was a pretty backdrop, and I felt that was a good way to segue in. But this is a true need of a piece of equipment that is deteriorating before us and needs to be considered for replacement. On the next slide, we're talking about our rescue department, where they are looking for the continuation of the vehicle replacement program, as well as some equipment replacement and communications upgrade. So you'll notice the communication upgrade has been in all of the articles so far. That it's a coordinated effort between all of the majority of the departments within the town. When we start talking about radios and towers, and we went through a big communications upgrade a few years ago, and it's typically broken up between the reserves because it impacts all of our public safety operations. So their FY26 proposal is $410,000. Within Public Works, they have their annual truck replacement schedule for both Public Works and Buildings and Grounds. There's the consideration of a sidewalk plow, and I don't think I meant to have that bullet there. It should be sidewalk plow replacement. So sorry about that. Their FY26 proposal is $165,000. For solid waste, we have within the plan some energy efficiency conversions, a request for a forklift replacement, as well as container replacements and vehicle. Their FY26 proposal comes in at $20,000.
What vehicle could possibly fit into a $20,000 department budget?
Oh, well, the narrative is on their 5-year, so their vehicle replacement is within the 5-year plan. The 20,000 is,
May not be happening this year.
yeah, it's not for FY26, but yeah, good catch. Under comprehensive town improvements, we have a variety. I'm not going to read every one on you, as you have, the presentation is online and you have the plan in front of you. But we're looking at streetlight and intersection upgrades, some accessibility improvements, road improvements, sidewalk extensions, trail work, and the FY26 proposal for that is $865,000.
While we're on those improvements, I could ask, just in general, would it be possible to consider accessibility improvements in our town parks to be included in that? Is there any element of that particular item? Maybe this is not the time to ask these specific questions. I can wait.
I think we rolled that into the facilities.
Facility. Okay, great. Thank you.
On the next slide, we get into municipal facilities where, again, we look at our revaluation, some computers, copiers, furniture, flooring, building exterior improvements, harbor and wharf renovations, some energy efficiencies, and building renovations, to look for an FY26 proposal of $622,500.
Earl, do you want to say something?
John, I just thought that I need to correct my tip in terms of tip.
Portions of that are under the TIF.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
The next slide shows our cable department, where we'll be looking to upgrade cable equipment. I believe there's been a multitude of conversations amongst council and staff for, in particular, this room, as well as town-wide needs for upgrading some of our technology with cable. Their FY26 proposal is $24,000. Moving on to the TIFs, we'd be looking at sidewalk repairs, as well as sidewalk equipment and your accessibility improvements. The FY26 proposal for the Destination Freeport TIF is $250,000. And the final slide I have before you is just a summary of our reserve balances for you to see where we stand. Currently, 5 of the reserve balances are what I would label below their benchmark, with the benchmark being the 5-year plan and the average of the 20-year plan. Taking the average of those two, wanting to hit somewhere in the middle on our benchmark. And part of this is reviewed and funded at the end of the year, based on how we've performed for the year. We put money back into the reserves, so these numbers will change as, as the fiscal years go on. And we look at where there are shortfalls and try to supplement them with savings that we've seen or fees that have come in, any of those funding sources of the reserve. So this is just a quick snapshot of the unaudited reserve balances as of 12/31, and the comparison of the plan to those benchmarks. And in a nutshell, that's my plan for you. I know tonight is really just a high-level overview of the capital plan. I know you have a lot of documentation in front of you that goes into detail about each of these items that I very briefly went over. And I look forward to beginning the process at the first workshop.
Thank you so much. This is an incredible presentation. This is very user-friendly. I feel like anyone can pick this up and understand it, and I can't imagine the amount of work you put into every single one of these tables. So I really just want to make sure you know that this is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a big change from what you've seen in the past, so hopefully it's readable and easy, and I'm really looking at it as a work in progress, so feedback is most welcome to make sure it's a working document for everybody that makes sense.
John?
2 questions, Jessica. Does the effort to, or where does, let's say, not does it, because I'm sure it does, well, maybe I'm not sure it does, I hope it does. Does the effort to bond for the large piece of fire apparatus that we already voted on and is moving forward, does that provide any buoyancy, in other words, a little bit of relief in some of the capital planning for that department?
Yeah.
Or was that particular piece of equipment sort of already factored in? Like, I'm just imagining that sizable piece of equipment, whatever the price is and however much we may or may not put into the bond, but does that provide a little bit of buoyancy in contrast, I guess, to this slide, which is, it looks like, 5 of our 9 categories here are under where you would say they should be, and I listened to your recommendations quite earnestly. So I'm wondering sort of how do those 2 things kind of relate to each other?
Yeah, so the fire reserve is actually, we've in anticipation of the replacement of this unit, which prior to really evaluating the apparatus, it was scheduled for, I believe, another year out. It wasn't initially on the radar until 27, I believe. But given the condition and nature of things, we really had to bump this up. So we had been working on building this reserve in anticipation of that purchase. So that's why you see the fact that the variance for fire is actually positive, because we had been working on that. Having that at this juncture will actually allow for us to focus new monies coming in to these other categories for items that make sense to fill that void, right? For like what I would say
We don't have to be saving
capital.
for a fire truck that we just put out to
Yep.
bond. We can do something else with those dollars.
Yes, and so we'd be able to take the existing funds that are in fire and reserve them for the next apparatus, which is actually replacement, which is currently scheduled just outside of the 5-year plan. So it allows us to kind of maintain that benchmark for the next one without feeling like we were in a back-to-back crunch, right, of needing to replace multiple units. But it does give us flexibility to take some of the fees that come in that go towards our reserves, as well as savings from the operational year, and allocate it to some of these other benchmarks or articles that are falling a little short, where we would want to see more reserve dollars come in.
Thank you.
So, Jessica and I, it's a work in progress in so many ways, right? Like, she's doing a great job channeling GFOA best practices, so industry best practices for municipal capital planning. And we are also shifting the way that council is looking at the capital plan, because in the past, you've had a couple of meetings couple of workshops at the end of meetings on the capital plan. So responding to comments from counselors last year, Jessica and I kind of built a draft budget to kind of budget schedule to kind of guide council. That includes this discussion coming back next meeting, March 4th?
3rd or 4th, yeah.
To schedule the public hearing, set the public hearing on the capital plan for April 1st, and then have a standalone workshop on March 13th, have a workshop as part at the end of the March 18th council meeting, have another workshop on March 25th, which, if I do my math correctly, that is a standalone. So giving you kind of 3 more bites at this capital plan. All we can do is give you the documents in a way that we think is more user-friendly. I really enjoyed the work that Jessica put into the documents, because I think if you throw those up online, people will be able to go through this and really understand what we're asking for and why. But I don't quite know yet how you want to organize your use of the workshops. What do you need from staff, I guess, is my question as we move forward. Do you want us to break this up into smaller, manageable parts with a little presentation that would spark discussion for you to talk about a small part? Do you want to have a larger conversation? Have Jessica come, as she already is, prepared to talk about whatever's in the capital plan, and be able to field questions or take questions that we maybe don't have the answer to. I'm looking to move staff resources in the way that best supports your going through this process, in a way that when you get to the end, you're not saying, oh, gee, I wish I had asked, or I really don't know, but really understanding fully what you're voting on and feeling like we've given you all the information you need.
I guess in just reaction to that, my first reaction to that, Sophie, is in years past, I think we've asked, collectively on the council, we've asked, well, could you give us a list of your, like, must-have, and what are some, like, you know, the usual, like, can you tell us what you absolutely have to have and what you'd like to have and what, you know, would be great if we have enough money? And that already happens, right?
I was going to say, Jessica and I...
We already, like, when we listen to the staff, we actually already have that process done. So I have found that it's not productive, let's say, maybe even not fair, to ask staff to make those recommendations after they've gone through all of this activity. And so we can assume that all of the things in the recommended capital budgets, or we might assume, not we have to, but we might assume that they're either requirements for compliance, like the fire truck, or absolute deterioration of something, or, you know, we don't, I mean, the vehicles and the equipment that our public safety uses are their job. We have to make sure that that is in working order. So I think that it's less a, well, we could take some of this out and we can maybe do that. I think it's more of, are we really, because the capital, I've learned this the hard way, the capital budget cannot be taken as its own just singular year cylinder. It has to be in context of a 5 or even larger schedule of activities. So I appreciate the effort to get to all of that information, but I'm actually less concerned that there's going to be too much over here or not enough over there, because the way we do capital budgeting is already so well programmed. This is turning into like somebody paid me to say this, and it's not really what I'm intending. But I guess what I'm getting at is I appreciate the effort to have a lot of discussion about it, and I'd love to hear more about why we're doing this vehicle this year and not next year, or those kinds of things. But that's an informational item. I don't think that's something that we're going to debate. And at least in my experience, on finishing up a third term here, having seen how well the capital reserve budgeting works for keeping things current, I'm not very well inclined to come in and say, I've got a whole new plan here. I think it works really well. And so what I'm concerned about was the last slide, which is that 5 of the 9 categories are under the targeting. I already know Jessica is quite conservative on the targeting, and I might be a little less conservative, but not that much. And so I'm concerned that how are we going to catch up to those things? Those are the kind of conversations I'd be more interested in. I find I have a particular thing about trying to get some accessibility to our public spaces, but other than that, which it sounds like is already in place, or at least can be in place, I'm not thinking that there's a whole lot of wrenching we need to do on the capital planning.
So I am very impressed with the amount of thought that went in by department heads about wants and needs. So I'm glad you don't want to tell people how to plow, which I've been in towns where that happens. So very thankful for that. I do think that there are some larger service level conversations that you could have. So for example, I think it would be a worthy conversation for you to understand that Winter has some space layout issues at the library at the same time that Earl is having some major space constraints at Public Works at the same time that we're looking at managing a public safety change of some sort for a building, right? That to me is this big, huge dollar amount that's out there. I think it's important that you understand all of those needs so that you can make good choices. I think Winter has some ideas for the library that would involve a smaller investment of money but make things much more usable for her team. So I think that would be a good conversation. I think a conversation about the silver bullet in terms of when I was looking, so I did crash the council leadership coffee with Rod for a few minutes, and I think council should really be talking about, does it make sense to get rid of the 2 current silver bullets and put one compacting silver bullet someplace outside of town, or a larger compacting silver bullet at the transfer facility? Are there things that would make sense in that regard? And that's kind of new information for us. Yep. But I think it's also about figuring out, as we are in kind of this growth mode to add housing and people, what does that mean for our services and our capital needs long term? So I am very satisfied with how department heads thought about this capital plan, because we're not in the budget yet. Keep being told we're not in the budget yet. It's just a plan. But I do think that staff is following council's lead as to what does the service level look like in the future. Because if you keep telling me that we want X, we're going to keep building the infrastructure into the plan to deliver X. But do we want X? Do we want X squared, or do we want something different? So that's my thought.
And
So I agree with John that I think diving into the details about these particular pieces of equipment are probably is not the most productive use of our time. I think I agree with Sophie's point that really having the larger conversations about what is this capital plan building us toward in terms of these departments, and what are we expecting of the staff of these departments to be able to do with this equipment, whether it's solid waste or snow plowing, sidewalks, which, we heard a concern about today. And some of that is going to feed into the operational budget piece around staffing, and some of that's going to be the capital plan. I would say the other thing that I think would be most helpful for me is more information, and it's really here. It's not that it's not here, but perhaps a streamlined presentation of how this is funded, because it's coming from a lot of different sources, and you mentioned some of them, Jessica. So some of it's fees, some of it's TIFs, some of it's...
So you're talking the reserve balance funding, not the capital plan funding?
Right.
Okay.
And so, because I think as we are trying to communicate this back to residents and to taxpayers, we certainly had a lot of discussions. I had a lot of discussions leading up to the referendum on the fire truck. And so the idea that we did end up having to bond that because it wasn't going to fit into the capital plan for all of the reasons we've discussed a lot of times. But to be able to communicate to residents how we are planning and how that is how those reserves are funded in order to make sure that we are able to maintain or to reach the staffing levels or the service levels that we're looking at, and to have that have the least impact on the taxation rate. So I think giving us more information to be able to communicate that would be helpful.
Sure.
I also agree with John, and I agree with Eric, and I agree with Sophie, and probably would agree with Joanna. While I don't think we need to try and say what's the must-have, what's the nice-to-have, because I agree that everything in there is probably a must-have, because it wouldn't have made it this far if it wasn't. But it sounds like when, Sophie, you were sort of talking about the process, there are some policy questions that you probably have floating in your mind, and Jessica has floating in her mind, and Earl and Winter and Bob. So some things were pretty clear, like, yeah, we need one of these, let's put it in. We need one of these, let's put it in. This, well, we're not sure. That would be a good discussion to have. So maybe you could sort of tee up an agenda for us at one of those workshops to say, here are 6 interesting policy questions you might want to consider.
I agree with everybody, just for the record. And I will say that I think when we were having the Finance Committee meeting, there's some intention and hope that the Finance Committee will add capacity to have these conversations in future years. It's a little fresh, and we're still kind of figuring it out. So this year is a little different, but I am hopeful in the next couple of years we'll have the capacity to more regularly have these conversations, not just budget time.
Yeah, I also think that we're teeing up for the March meeting the conversation about funding for the fire truck, how much to borrow, how much not to, and also a start of a conversation about the funding, because I think there are some quick buttons we could pull, levers we could pull on reserve funding, and I think Jessica has some thoughts on that. So I think at least the out of the gate things we could at least talk about a little bit.
I don't know if anybody else saw it. It was either yesterday or Sunday's New York Times. There was an article on the private equity decisions about controlling the manufacturer of fire apparatus, and there are now essentially 3 companies that manufacture fire apparatus for the entire country, and their backlog is years long, which validates everything that we've been hearing. But that's an external explanation for part of the reason why we had to bond for this fire truck is because we were reserving for it to cost this much, and then when it came in front of us, it cost like nearly double that amount, which we had no control over, and yet we're still under obligation to have working, safe fire apparatus equipment, not to mention you want the piece of equipment that's brand new when it comes to your house when you got a fire at it. So I just found that very insightful in timing and kind of basically a non-government speak piece on how to describe that kind of activity and what it's caused, and we are by far not the only town that's struggling with skyrocketing costs of fire apparatus.
It's almost like Freeport doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we have to
Imagine that.
make sure we always remember that. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Did you have everything you need for guidance on the next couple of meetings?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, and if things come up where you're like, we could use more guidance, let us know.
Yeah, I think key here that Jessica put right out there that she's been putting out there with staff and with me all along is this is a work in progress, and we want to make it the best roadmap we have so that we at least can have it for a few years without having to think too much about it.
One really quick follow-up question, and I understand where you want to go from a policy standpoint and reserve funding and the general discussion. Is there, I just thinking in terms of department heads and bringing them to these meetings, do you want us to present like a timeline of, the first meeting, we just go by article, right? In the first meeting, we do police and fire rescue, or to have these general discussions, or are we looking to do more round?
I think I would take a few minutes. I think we will internally bring the heavy users of the capital plan together and have a conversation about policy discussions, because if we can have time for 3 bigger policy discussions and we could center them all around public works, wouldn't that be great? If we could center them all around public safety and just have Nate and Bob come.
Perfect.
I would think maybe we could try to do that.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Sophie, did you say there's a workshop towards the end of March? I got one on the 13th that I see.
Yeah, I have one on the 18th, which is a meeting.
The meeting, yeah.
And then I had to hold the 25th for one in case you didn't get your work done.
Okay. So it's not officially scheduled yet?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
So we'll
just
make a
in
decision as we move along.
But the 13th is officially scheduled, that Thursday?
Yep.
Thursday the 13th.
All right. So that concludes that part of the meeting. Thank you very much, Jessica. And also the department heads who showed up to support Jessica. Thank you. All right, so the next part of our meeting will be executive session. Councilor Egan. Wait, is that how we do it?
I move we go into executive session.
Pursuant to...
Oh, yeah, you have to. Sorry.
To be ordered. Sure.
Here, already put that away.
There's still more work to do, John.
I move that we enter executive session, or be it ordered that the council enter executive session pursuant to 1 MRS Section 405-6A for discussion related to the town manager's annual performance evaluation.
Second.
We need to roll call that one. So Councilor Egan.
Yes.
Councilor Pilch.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Brown.
Yes.
Councilor Benoit votes yes. All right, we are entering session. We're going to go to the clerk's office.